Stephen Childs.
Cliff.
Here you are. That's right. I do get some of my last name. Did you do the last name exercise today?
No, I hadn't.
No. Okay. So,
I mean, I prepared for it,
right.
but no, we didn't do it.
A lot of people don't know how to say my last name.
Yeah.
It's a real fun Polish name. You actually say Jurkiewicz. But
Jurkiewicz.
Jurkiewicz, right? You got to get the little
Okay.
twirl in there. But to be officially a Polak. But the origin of the last name is the Jurk is just George in Polish. And whenever you see a Polish last name that ends in IWICZ, and it's a very common ending, it just means son of. So my last name just means son of George, right? Very long way around. Childs is a much easier name to pronounce.
But very similar in the meaning, though.
Yeah.
It means son of a noble person.
There you go. Well, I think your meaning is much
So,
better.
I don't know.
I'm just son of
Son of
George.
a something.
Some son of some George
Yeah.
somewhere. But welcome to the podcast.
Yeah.
Good
having
to
me.
have you here. So my first question is always the same to everyone, which is the who is question. So we get to know a little bit about you. So who's Stephen Childs?
Hey, that could be a deep question, depending on, we could spend most of the podcast on that. But I would say I'm a dad first, husband, team leader, CHRO, coach, friend. Maybe not all in that order, but the dad's especially first.
Right. What is it about being a father that makes you think of that first? It sounds like you sort of lift yourself a little when you say dad first.
Well, if you're going to prioritize all your jobs,
Right.
which is an HR person, right? I spend time prioritizing jobs for people. That's my priority, right? Being the dad first. And the rest of the stuff falls into place pretty well. But, I worry most about getting that right.
Do you think you got it right?
I definitely didn't get it all right.
Right. Just say, hey, here's some advice,
I think I
especially
got
for new
enough of
fathers.
it right.
Right.
Yeah.
Talk to the new fathers out there.
Yeah.
About getting it right. Like, what is it to know about getting it right?
Yeah, actually, I was telling a story, and this is a story literally that sort of comes from the book, my book. I've got a book coming out, and this literally comes from the book, and it's a story of how bad I got something wrong, especially as it relates to my daughter. You got time for me to tell a story?
We do.
Yeah. So I was talking about building some habits, and one of the habits that I built going back, I guess it's 10 years ago, was active listening. So we had some of that going on at work, and then I had somebody that wanted to kind of go through this coaching process and kind of learn how to be a better active listener. And so I started brushing up myself so we could do it together. And so as I'm going through some of these tips and tricks, right, in the neuroscience of how to figure out how to listen better, I realized I didn't listen very well. I didn't listen very well to my team. I'm a D, so if you ever done a DISC assessment?
Yep.
So I was a D and an I, probably still am a D and an I. And so when you read the description of that, it says summarize everything and make sure it's really quick. And so that's what my team got out of it. Hey, don't bother Stephen, get it done, get it quick. And then I was like, that's terrible, right? I'm not giving people enough time to even think through what they want to talk about, get into the meat of stuff. But then I looked at it and I thought, man, I'm doing that at home too, right? So I've got this 14-year-old daughter who likes to talk and tell stories. And it was somewhat very difficult to get through a 45-minute discussion, right? I found myself not actively listening and trying to solve the problem instead of trying to kind of help her solve it herself.
Right.
And so, even 10 years ago, I knew that I had to fix that. So I actually applied that at work and I applied that at home, and it made a world of difference. So I realized even through this journey of becoming a CHRO and becoming, an author or coach, a lot of these things that I was learning were probably more important. I tell people when I coach them, it's more important that you get these things right at home and for yourself than it is for work.
Do you think people, that's the mistake they make, especially in the process of change? And a lot of us recognize change through work. That's
Sure.
where it's brought to our attention.
I did.
Right. And so that relationship of, okay, so it might have come to your attention through work in some way, shape, or form. But you need to start at home first. Why is that the most important first step?
Well, one, because it's personal, right? So if I told you to change your behavior, so this is a pretty good statistic actually, as it relates to the coaching that I do, because I spend a lot of time on micro habits. And I usually get people to understand how to build a micro habit before we coach. That way, when they come into the coaching, they can apply the habit formation to whatever they're trying to learn and change. And what I noticed was when I gave people options and we sat down for the first time and we said, here, and usually it's through an executive presence model that's sort of built on work-related and what they call ease, personal stuff, diet and exercise and, mental preparedness, those kind of things. I tell them, pick something that you are going to care about to build a habit, because we want you to learn that first. Then you can apply those tools to anything. And so when they look and really think, and I said, just don't blurt it out, go home and think about it. And then they come back, 70% of the time they pick something personal. 30% of the time they pick something work related and then wish they picked something personal. But when they pick something personal, it really matters. So it could be health, it could be sleep. All this is health related, but sleep and diet and exercise and active listening with their family, it could be any of those. And it turns out that that's a lot more important, which makes the micro habit process so much stickier.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so let's back up
Sure.
for the audience for a second. So we've actually started to cover some ground here.
Love it.
Yep. Talk about your professional roles. And so you've already mentioned executive coach, but that's not the only thing you do.
No.
Right? So let's talk a little bit about, just to frame that the right way for the audience.
Yeah, so first and foremost, career-wise, I'm a CHRO. I'm CHRO for Panasonic Automotive. We do all the cool stuff that's in your car, right? Pretty large organization, a lot of complexity, as you can imagine, and learning a lot of stuff from being here and listening to really smart people this week. And I've started coaching people internally with Panasonic quite a while ago, and I also coach people externally, and mostly in the C-suite and mostly in behavioral change. A lot of what I focus on is sort of the neuroscience of elite performance related to behavior change, and that's pretty much what I focus on.
Why? I mean, that's so you and I met, the backstory.
Yeah.
You and I met at an event earlier this year, and you sat down, and it's one of those events where, a company comes in, vendor like
Sure.
a phenom sits down with an executive, and we talk about what needs are and, learn a little bit about each other.
Yep.
And the second you started talking about, hey, I'm writing a book, which isn't the core of what the interest was, but what
Right.
the book about, and I'll let you talk about that in a minute, really interested me. And I said, wow, I've got this great event that I'm doing at NASA. At the end of the year, I bring in all my executives that advise us in the company, and I think they need to hear your message. And we spent a bunch of time at that event, not even talking about what we were supposed to talk about. And I got you here, and thank you for coming. Very grateful to have you. But I think let's go into the why you thought going into executive coaching with a really specific discipline around these micro habits and
Sure.
helping people, like things like active listening. Why did you have an interest in that?
Yeah, I think just being an HR person for as long as I have, even when I was a business partner, director, CHRO, I've always been coaching people, and sometimes informally and sometimes formally. What I noticed was the more that I prepared myself to coach them better, not just wing it based off some HR knowledge that I had, then the better the outcomes were, right? And I was like, man, I need to continue to prepare, like a lot more. I went through this program at Columbia. It's a graduate level certification program in coaching. And my thesis was on coaching in a way where you build in the micro habits, where you basically teach people to build habit formation skills. So when you're coaching them, then this stuff is sticky long term. You're not going in helping people through a problem, muscling their way through. You're actually teaching them skills that then they can apply to something else later. Teach to fish, right? I usually say. And then when I started using those tools, it was unbelievable what people were able to accomplish. I told a story earlier, right, of someone that I was coaching that changed so many different parts of his life just by making one small change initially that then cascaded into a bunch of different changes. Yep. And then I was like, okay, I'm hooked, right? love doing this. I love doing my job. There's a lot of fulfilling things being a CHRO, but the executive coach, when you can sit with somebody and spend the time, which I was not very good at. We already talked about that.
Yep.
And spend the time with somebody, then it turns out to be life-changing. And I tell people, for the people that I coach, especially internally and externally, it's worked 100% of the time. Whatever they were wanting to try to achieve. And I tell people, don't pick something small, pick something big, audacious. And some do, and some still kind of sandbag a little bit. 100% of the time, they're able to achieve those things just by the small little habits and some other tools, time boxing, some other stuff, saying yes to things.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about
sure.
saying yes, because that was really big. But before we get to that, just so people know, and I think it's important, you wrote a book on this.
Yep.
And let's talk about that. When is it coming out? I think you're in pre-order right now.
Yeah, it's
Amazon,
pre-order
right?
on Amazon.
So
It's
the name
called
of the book.
Just Be Undeniable. I stole that actually from a conversation Joe Rogan was having with Bert Kreischer, the comedian.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and he basically told Bert said, how can I get my own Netflix special? And Joe said, just be undeniable. Go crush it. Go work your ass off. Can I say that? You can bleep that out.
You can say that.
And make sure that whatever you're doing is undeniable, and you will get that. And he did, right? He did. I think he had his own movie too, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, that's awesome. So I actually turned my coaching into that philosophy. So when I talk to people, I'm like, we're going to make you undeniable. Whatever you write on that sticky note, whatever you write on your piece of paper.
What are some of the things that people write that does it surprise you?
Yeah. Well, what surprises me normally, I don't know that it surprises me anymore, that how many executive C-suite people that I sit across from, and I sort of tell stories before we get started, just to kind of know what you're getting into when you start going into this work, that pick something very personal, right? Something that they've been dealing with that they haven't even talked to people about. And that becomes, it's very hard to do that. It's very hard to, when you're a coach anyway, it's all between us. You know, this is confidential, so everything we're going to talk about is confidential. But when they lay sort of things on the table to go, look, I've been hiding a lot of this. Actually, I was taught to hide a lot of my faults too. You know, when you're growing up in a leadership role, it's emphasize the stuff you're really good at and kind of just hide the stuff that you're not good at. And then 10 years ago, it was, that's crazy. Just let everybody know what you're not good at. And I was like, that's going to be really hard. Yeah. And then get help from your team and actually build your team around it. So when I sit with executives, it's so hard for them to write on there something that they're bad about and bad at and then work on it. But once they do, they're so in, right?
So you're hitting on a principle that I've known for a little while now, and I'm going to give credit to the person that taught it to me, which is our CEO, Mahi Bhai-Reddy, and his brother and our CEO, Hari Bhai-Reddy, really believe that the definition of a great leader at any level in any organization is a leader that, number one, can admit their weaknesses, but number two, hires for them.
Right.
Talk a little bit about that, because you clearly believe that.
Yeah. And, all right. So when 10 years ago, it's about the same time, I went through the Center for Creative Leadership, and it's a pretty eye-opening. A lot of people we've sent through that Panasonic over the years, and almost everybody, people that are willing to change and really willing to listen, get a lot out of it. I got a lot out of it. They do a 360. They do a lot of assessments, Hogan assessments, some other things. So they really kind of pick you apart and then they just kind of lay it on the table. But the 360 was a cool thing because they said, hey, look, we're going to do this 360. And what we want to do is we want you to share it with your boss. Of course, right? Share it with your boss, because if you know what it is and then your boss knows what it is, what your gaps are, y'all can work on it together. But they said, hold on just for a minute. We also want you to go back and share it with your team. I was like how many of my team members? Right. And so it was, okay, all of your team members. Why wouldn't you share it with all your team members? Well, some of this, even the comments, some of this stuff is pretty eye-opening, right? They go, that's the point. So just try it. And I said, okay, I'm going to try this thing. So very curious, right? I'm a very curious person. So I said, I'm out of curiosity, I'm going to see how this works. And so I came back and did that. And again, anticipating that I was going to get a little bit of poking the holes in, hey, well, Steven's really bad at this and Steven's really bad at that, or that. None of those things happened. Nobody snickered. Nobody did anything other than, yeah, we already knew that, right? Partly we already knew that. I'm really glad you know that. So let's work together to figure out how we build this team. By the way, I'm really good at this, Steven. Let me jump in and do this part. Oh, can you please? I mean, talk about a load off. Once you do this and people start coming, I had people from different departments, because what my president and I did, we took our 360s and we put them on Yammer. Right. And we're trying to encourage other leaders to share it with everybody, and we shared it with the whole company.
Yeah. Now you've just dated yourself a little bit, right? Just by saying Yammer. So
we still use it, man.
Do you really? So Yammer is like the version of Slack or Teams way back when, which actually not that long ago.
Yeah, we
like
still use Yammer and Slack and Teams.
Yep. Yeah, Yammer. So it's for those that don't know. It's
10 years ago, right? This was the 10 years ago.
Yeah. It's been around for a while. Like Yammer's like 20 years old.
Yeah.
And so I'm surprised that some folks are still using it for no other reason than there are so many other tools that have come out. And if Teams is built in, they usually switch over.
But I literally became a better leader over a period of a few weeks after doing that.
Why do you think? And is that because your team already knew?
Yeah.
And so it's just like, okay, great. Like, thank you for your recognizing what we already saw.
Yeah.
So there's a vulnerability there that like it makes you, I think, a little bit more human as a leader.
Sure.
That you're not perfect, that you're flaws, but is it positioned in a way that you team are here because you're actually really good at the things I'm not, and that's
that actually became part of my vernacular.
Right.
Hey, Cliff, we're about to do this project, and you don't want me dotting I's and crossing T's. You're great at this, so if you don't mind, take the role of making sure that we're really dotting the I's and crossing the T's on the project plan. Right? Vision, some other stuff, having cross-functional conversations, those kind of things I'll take. So it became part of my vernacular to point out the things and admit on a regular basis, this is not me. This is this person, or this is that person. And that builds a lot of trust in your group too, right? You said it's, part of it's vulnerability, but it's also authenticity. So you become more authentic over a very short period of time. And what builds trust more than authenticity? Yep. There's not many things that build trust more than that.
So you talked today in my event here on the campus of NASA about the power of saying yes. Talk about that here. Like, why did you present that to my group? Why do you talk about the power of yes? Clearly, you're learning to use the power of yes in your conversation, but why is it so important?
Yeah, actually, I had somebody that interviewed me. This was, I don't know, probably 7-8 years ago. And it was somebody in a mentee relationship. But it was a mentee. And they said, what do you think was the contributing factor to your growth? And so I really thought about that for a second. And I go, saying yes. And they're like, what do you mean by that? And I go, if I look through my career, and going back to when I was an HR manager, and things would come up. Hey, who wants to go through a reduction in force for this whole business unit? We got to actually divest this whole business unit. We got to lay these 60 people off. Who wants to do that? I went, I do. I've never done that before, right? So, hey, I'll jump in and figure out how to go through this process. So then it was, hey, who wants to go through whatever this next thing? Hey, we're doing an acquisition. Who wants to be on part of this acquisition team? I'll do the acquisition, right? And so I volunteered for a lot of different things, including volunteering to take over groups of, hey, who wants to take over comp and benefits? I'll do it, right? I hadn't been over comp and benefits, but I knew that quickly I could go figure out how to learn enough to get the right people doing the right things. But it was saying yes to all these things. Here's the kicker. I don't know how much time we got. But I was doing that really good internal, right? And I'd built a pretty good career internal for doing that. But external, I wasn't doing that very well. I didn't do any of these things 10 years ago. I wasn't on boards. I didn't speak at events. I didn't do a lot of external mentoring. I wasn't coaching. I wasn't writing articles for Forbes. None of those things I was doing 10 years ago. And I said, I'm going to start saying yes externally. And it was a doctor of a hospital system that kind of taught me into it. And I said, well, I'm just going to go with it. And so somebody goes, hey, would you mind speaking here? And I was like, I'm going to do it. And I did, and I met somebody. And I'm like, hey, would you mind being on a board member here? And I did reluctantly, and it turned out to be something that I cared about, still care about today, that I didn't even know I cared about.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm going to keep this up. Then this movie came out, Yes Man,
Yeah,
Jim Carrey.
sure.
And it already came out, I think, and I just rewatched it, and I go, oh my, I'm all in now. So I really kind of did that externally. And I got involved in speaking. I got involved in boards. I got involved in community work and nonprofit work and all of these different things. And it literally changed the direction of my career.
Right.
And I said, and the smallest thing of saying yes, I didn't necessarily want to come to the event. I came to meet you.
Right.
And I was telling the story to somebody, actually. And I said, normally when I go to events, some of the events that are supposed to be CHRO level, they're not. I get there and they're not really CHRO level. And I said, but I'm going to go anyway. I'm going to go and somebody's going to really appreciate this message, which is another thing I sort of changed my position on is I don't speak for me anymore. I speak for other people. Right. That'll change your life too. But I said yes to that. I met you and now I'm here, right? Mm-hmm. But I got so many stories that are very similar to that have not just changed my life. Now, if I look at the ticker of things that it's changed, it's incredible. So I do tell people there's a lot of the micro habits are great. There's a lot of different things. There's time boxing is great. There's a lot of things in my book that I use in coaching, but that yes is it literally increases your surface level for luck, right? People go, hey, how lucky did you get to be in this or do that? I go, yeah, it's luck, all right, right? It's a lot of yeses that some cases were pretty painful.
Well, I appreciate the yes to come here. Like I think not only has my audience gotten a lot out of it, I think just on the conversations we have had over the last 48 hours, that you and I both have gotten a lot out of you saying yes just to even come here. Yeah. I want to end on this. Sure. So there's a lot that you presented this, yesterday. You were basically my keynote opening up my customer advisory event. And we can't go through all of that. But if there were a couple of things that people could do that follow the principles of just be undeniable, what would they be and how do they get started?
Yeah, and some of them are so simple, right? And there's a lot of rabbit holes you can go down. And, I think part of my job now is try to introduce things to people that then they can go get lost down the rabbit hole. One of those is just figure out what's one thing that you really want to change in yourself or about yourself. And then just that micro habit piece, right? Start one thing, right? It takes one step. And I always tell people, just do it 90 days. Anybody can do anything 90 days. If you do something from 90 days, literally it rewires the neural pathways in your brain. And the 90th day, you're so happy of who you are. And you're so proud of yourself for 90 days. You accomplished something. So that's really important, is to figure out how to learn the skill of change. And that's a good way to do it, especially when it's something personal.
And you had my audience, and you told me about this before, and it was fun to see it in action, right? Write it down on a Post-it.
Yeah.
Right? So talk about that a little bit. Like, why is that an important part of the exercise?
Yeah, it's a mental commitment. So here you've got a bunch of people in a room, right? And I talk about the micro habits, and I could talk about the micro habits and leave, right? But then I figured out if I just get everybody involved and get them to write something down, which is also, there's a neuroscience hack to that, right? To start to build stuff in their unconscious. In the conversations I've had with your team today, that people told me, multiple people, hey, you were in my head. You were in my head. I actually got up and did the walk this morning because I wrote it down on the sticky note. So that's your short answer, is once somebody writes it down on the sticky note, they made a commitment. And then if they put their phone number and know that I'm going to reach out and help them, they've made another commitment. So now they know they got me involved. So my goal is, hopefully out of the group that's here, there's going to be a number of them. There always is. There's going to be a number of them that not only stick to that, but then start writing it down every day like I talked about. And then stick to the 90 days. And then in 90 days, they're going to go, holy crap, how did I get here in 90 days? And then now what do I do? What do I do next? It's called habit stacking. I want to do something else. And I usually tell people, just keep going that first one a while before you
Does
stack.
it become a little bit of, maybe you could call it an addiction?
Yeah. So it becomes really powerful because you see yourself. It's a win. Anytime you have a win, you increase dopamine, serotonin, endorphins. So it's those wins every day you wake up and you walk towards that 90 days is a little more of a boost in those things. And it is, serotonin and endorphins and
They're
all that's very
real.
addictive. Yeah,
Yes.
very real.
How can people find you? And where do we get the book?
So yeah, it's on Amazon. So it's on pre-sale on Amazon, Just Being Undeniable. So you could go on and pre-order. February 15th, it should come out. Neuro Executive Coaching is my coaching business. And certainly anybody who wants to reach out to me about anything related to CHRO is you go to LinkedIn, and I have a really big philosophy of reaching out to anybody who contacts me and helping them. People's done that for me my whole career, and me and my team will help you with anything that's needed.
That's great. Steve,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.